few weeks have brought growing evidence of continuing attempts to interfere with the upcoming 2018 midterm elections. On Thursday, the White House tried to show it's taking the threat seriously. The administration brought out top intelligence and law enforcement officials to detail what each department is doing to try to combat foreign influence. Here to talk in depth about that and about those ongoing efforts to disrupt is Derek Thompson, senior editor at The Atlantic. Derek, welcome.
Thank you.
Facebook removed 32 pages and accounts on Tuesday for what they called coordinated inauthentic behavior, which is a new phrase in our vocabulary. What are they actually talking about there?
Well, it's really interesting because, in a way, this is like a spy versus spy story.
Yeah.
You know, for months...
And those of us who remember Mad Magazine.
Right, yeah, no, but for months, for years, people have talked about Facebook as being a surveillance machine, misusing people's private data, right? And then you have the Kremlin, which is the global espionage leader of the last 50 years throughout the world. And so what you essentially have here is like a John le Carré novel happening on social media. You have the Kremlin using disguised identities in order to build an influence campaign for the midterms. And then you have Facebook, which is the sort of surveilling master of social media, using its own artificial intelligence in order to understand which of these accounts are authentic and which of them are coordinated, inauthentic attempts to sway public opinion.
We should say they did not attribute these accounts to the Russians, but intelligence officials believe they probably are.
I think that's exactly right. It's important to say that Facebook was careful in saying, we discovered this misinformation campaign. We noted a lot of similarities to the Internet Research Agency, which is a Kremlin-attached troll farm in Russia. And we believe that this is Russian, but we can't necessarily prove it. And why can't they prove it? Because the Russians are getting a lot more sophisticated about these misinformation tactics. They're not buying in rubles. They're buying in dollars. They're using third-party buyers. They're using what are called VPNs, or virtual private networks, in order to disguise the origin of these accounts, these pages, and this advertising buying. So the Russians are getting a lot more sophisticated. The Internet Research Agency is getting a lot more sophisticated, but so is Facebook.
So how did they find it if it's getting so much more difficult to find someone like this?
Yeah, they looked at a lot of sort of content similarities. A lot of these pages are written in broken English. And they also looked at the fact that these pages aren't necessarily being bought by actual individuals. There's clearly an attempt to disguise the origin of these purchases. So they use a combination of common sense and artificial intelligence in order to root out these identities, and then they've shut down the pages. 32 pages followed by 260,000 people. I think it's important to point out that when you look at the content of these pages, it doesn't seem all that nefarious or outside of the norm of Facebook, at the very least. There's some misinformation, there is some so-called fake news, but it seems like some people talking about immigration, some people talking about abolishing ICE. This is the conversation that's already happening on Facebook, right? Well, the thinking is that these pages were using relatively normal content in order to build audiences so that they could use misinformation campaigns in the midterms in November. So we caught them while they were imitating ordinary conversations.
They were building an audience.
But they were doing essentially what pundits and influencers do on this platform. They were trying to build an audience so that when the time came in November, they could strike.
So how do we protect, how does our government, how do tech companies protect the midterm elections?
This is a really, really difficult question, because what you have here is a situation where, you go back to 2016, and both Donald Trump and Mark Zuckerberg initially resisted the idea that Russians were using their organizations for a propaganda campaign. Zuckerberg has come around and said, look, I understand the Russians are trying to misuse my platform. I'm going to do something about it. But that story juxtaposes so violently to the story of Donald Trump, the lack of evolution of the President of the United States, who continues to offer apologies for Russia and refuses to stand with his intelligence advisors to say, we're doing our best to shut this down.
Derek Thompson, thank you so much.
Thank you.